Harrigan from North Carolina. Welcome to our committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for your testimony today. I wanted to talk about Chinese espionage in science and academia from the CSIS report and give you a couple examples here that will frame my question. In January of 2020, a Harvard University professor and two Chinese nationals, Yangqing Yi and Zhaozhang Zheng, were indicted for attempted theft of biological research. Dr. Lieber was a participant in the 1,000 Talents Plan while actively accepting National Institutes of Health and Department of Defense funding. Yi, a lieutenant of the PLA, compiled information on U.S. military projects for the CCP. Zheng committed the theft of 21 biological research vials to promote Chinese projects. In July of 2020, Sa Tiangyang, a University of Arkansas professor, was indicted for wire fraud for his acceptance of U.S. contracting funds related to NASA and the Air Force while being simultaneously employed by Chinese entities. In August of 2020, Zheng Dongcheng, a professor at Texas A&M, was charged with wire fraud for concealing his affiliation with Chinese universities and enterprises while accepting a NASA grant. His position allowed him access to sensitive NASA projects. He was also a participant of the 1,000 Talents Plan. I have only 5 minutes, so I cannot read the other countless examples of CCP infiltration into our national research apparatus. But my team compiled 58 different instances of various forms of research espionage that has occurred just in the last 6 years. So after reading this report, and after listening to your testimony today, it is incredibly troubling, and I simply want to know one thing. Why do we still have any Chinese nationals inside of our research institutions, especially within institutions that participate in research that is critical to our national interests and our national security? Mr. Sargent.
I have no idea. I don't think it makes any sense at all. I think we need to be far more secure in who we allow into this country and who we allow to conduct research, especially on U.S. taxpayer-funded dollars. And I think it's very dangerous for us not to carefully vet all of the people that are coming to the United States to study to make sure that they, in fact, are not linked to PLA institutions or universities. And one thing we know for sure is that not only is China after our technology, they are constantly adapting and adopting new strategies to acquire it. So we can't think we have now, after 4 years of efforts, reached the pinnacle of security and put everything in place we need to do, because the Chinese are going to adapt to it, and they're going to find ways around it. So we need to, as I say, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. We've got to continue to remain vigilant. And again, going back to the answer to your question, I don't think they should be.
Thank you. Mr. Stoff.
Obviously, I think this is a very complex issue. I think that definitely, and I agree with Mr. Sargent, that at least within critical technology fields, within STEM fields, a far more rigorous process, and I talk about this in my testimony, that needs to be done that requires the kind of vetting and due diligence and assessments that have. There may be other areas, like from my perspective, any of the humanities and social sciences and other things, that's not a concern to me. The Chinese should come here and learn how our democratic governance systems work, our legal structures, things like that. So I think a complete and total ban isn't necessarily meet the objectives that you're seeking. But I also want to point out something that I think is not really well understood, and that is the examples that you're describing relate primarily to these constructs of economic espionage, and intellectual property theft. And most of the problems and the threats that's occurring on campus are none of those things. They're not illicit. And the scale and scope of the other ways in which they're acquiring technology and know-how is often not espionage, and that is completely underrepresented, not understood in the scale and the scope, and we need to be more vigilant about that.
I have very limited time, so Dr. Zuber, I don't know that we're going to get to you, but I think we've got to keep in mind here, we've got access and we have placement with all of these individuals, and the CCP will exert leverage. That is a problem for our country. We need to deal with this, and we need to deal with it swiftly in our research institutions. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman's